Chapter 5. This week we look at two somewhat related topics: e-commerce security and the payment systems that are used in e-commerce. Now, obviously, you can't really have a payment system unless it's secure, so they are related. Although I will say that e-commerce security as a topic could not only be its own chapter, it could be its own course, and in fact, it can be its own degree. There are a number of institutions where you can get a degree in cybersecurity. But let's look at some of the key points that the authors give us in this chapter. So what's the environment that we find ourselves? First thing is, how big of a problem is this? Well, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, did a study of, is this a big problem or not? And what they came up with is that they estimate that the global economic impact of cybercrime is more than $1 trillion. And there are a number of other researchers that believe that it is even more significant than that. So this is not at all a trivial factor of what's going on right now. It's a real problem. The IBM Security Institute came up with and this is from 2021. I don't know if there's an updated report, but they had that the global breach, the cost of a data breach on average around the world is $4 million. So every time there's a data breach, on average, it's $4 million. Now, some of them cost a lot more than that, and we'll see an example of United Healthcare on a subsequent slide. The other thing that happens is that what exists right now, you may have heard the term the dark web, and that's an underground economy where people market, they sell and buy stolen information or a cyber crime developed malware and other things, all the tools that are necessary for a cyber criminal to create their nefarious activities. And so there's a whole underground economy around that. Unfortunately, one of the tools that they really take advantage of with cryptocurrency, it's a lot harder to follow the money. That used to always be the statement. You'd say, well, follow the money. With cryptocurrency, that's very difficult. But that's a whole nother topic. One of the first things we run into with cybersecurity is we've got this conflicting two objectives. We want our sites to be secure, but we want our sites to work well for our customers. And so there's that constant tension between those two parameters. Are we making it secure or easy to use? And I'll share with you an example in a minute. The problem is the more security you build into it, it adds more steps to the process. The way to think of it really easy is every time you want to log on to MyPCC, what do you have to do? Not only do you have to put in your username and password, but then you have to wait to get a text on your phone so you can put that in. That's the two-factor authentication, but it's an added step. And so it's I understand why we do that at the college, but it's always a bit of, oh, come on, I just want to go, check on my class, but so there's always that. It's going to make it more complicated, take more time, and it can, if you're not careful, hurt your profitability, even enough to where a business could go out of business if you make it too difficult to do business with you. And I don't remember last week if I mentioned this this story. But one of the things, well, let me share a different one with you. I know I haven't shared this one. When I was on a board of a local nonprofit here, they wanted to add some additional security to their website. And so they were looking at adding CAPTCHA, but in particular, they were intrigued by, CAPTCHA has a feature where if you're having trouble visually seeing it, you can use the audible. There'll be a CAPTCHA word that is spoken, but it's surrounded by a bunch of noise and background interference and other stuff that makes it difficult for a computer to determine what's being said, but a human can do it. And so we tried that, but what we found was it was so difficult for us to hear what it was actually saying that we decided that the visual CAPTCHA was much less of an issue for it. So it's this thing, you want it to be easy for people to use when they're making a purchase or getting onto your site. If you make it too difficult, they'll just go someplace else. So what are the security threats that we're facing today? Well, there's three main parts where we're vulnerable in our e-commerce business. Certainly the client or customer, the server, the company, the e-commerce company, but the way we communicate, through the internet communications pipeline, that's something a lot of people don't think about, is that you can tap into that and intercept communications and block them or alter them or insert your own information in. And so we have to be looking at really all three of those components to have a complete security system. And I like that the author put this in the textbook. This is a very simplified, operative word there, simplified kind of diagram of how a e-commerce transaction happens, the different activities that are associated. And it's pointing out with that magnifying glass all the places where there's a potential for a cyber criminal to target that, and that's so the vulnerability. And so even on this very simplified diagram, you see there are a whole lot of points where your e-commerce transaction is potentially vulnerable. We think about our homes and we think, well, we've got our doors and our windows are really the vulnerable points to our homes. But there are more vulnerable points to our homes for a physical, theft or criminal. One that a lot of people forgot to think about was garage doors. And some of the early garage door openers did not have really a secure system. And in fact, they only had a few codes that they used to pair the garage door opener transmitter to the receiver. And so the criminals would just go up and down streets with their vehicle broadcasting these generic kind of codes, and they'd see which garage door opened. And that would provide them then a potential entrance into that home if they determined that that was one they wanted to break into. And so the whole point of this is really just to emphasize again, there are so many places that our e-commerce is at risk. Some of the terms you'll hear for malicious code, they're listed in the textbook, the worms and viruses. What you hear a lot about today is ransomware. And we'll talk a little bit more about bots and botnets Key term to understand, though, for all of this is this idea of phishing. And so, what is phishing? It's just an attempt by a bad actor, a third party, to obtain information that they're not entitled to, and their intention is to use that information for their own financial gain, to steal or manipulate in ways that would benefit them. A more simple way of saying it is phishing is the concept, and you also hear the term social engineering. It's to trick someone into doing something that they shouldn't do, to trick them into giving you information that you're not entitled to, that can allow you to do bad things. So the tactics, like I said, social engineering is a key one. That's where you use your charm. You know, you come up to, you phone into someone, you get the secretary of engineering, and you give them this sob story on how your computer is locked up, and you need them to get you some information or something. And so you sweet talk them into doing it. Another example of social engineering, you'll see someone might be standing outside the front door of the business, and they've got their phone up to their ear like they're having a conversation. And so you come up and you swipe your employee card to the front door, it unlocks, and they open the door and go through. And while the door is swinging closed, the person on the fake phone call just reaches over and grabs the door and follows them into the building. They've now gained access to the building when they shouldn't. And again, that's this idea of using people's weaknesses to take advantage. Email scams, I think everybody has heard a lot about, some of the first ones that came out, I don't know, decades ago. The Nigerian banker who was trying to get the money out, and they just, if you'll allow, you would allow them to transfer $100 million to you, they just ask for most of it back, but you could keep 100,000 or something. And of course, all they're trying to do is to get your bank information so that they can, instead of putting money into your bank account, they take the money out. Phone calls have been always a nuisance. I hate telemarketers, but there's been a new wave of phone calls that where they are, and thanks to AI is one of the tools for mimicking a person's voice so that they can call in and pretend to be someone's granddaughter or grandson, and that they were on a trip to Mexico and they got in trouble and they're in jail and they need, some money to get out, and can you Venmo them, $1,000 or whatever. So there's more and more of that, and other types of someone calling up and talking you into, it's kind of like the email scams, a way to make quick money. Surprisingly, it's working. There's a lot of people fall for that, which just amazes me. And the last one is social media. When you're on social media, you're interested in having conversations and dialogues and other things, and you may not be paying attention, and you see someone's post that you really like and so forth, and they've got a link in there that you can click on for more information or something. And of course, when you do that, it takes you someplace that you shouldn't go, and you end up getting malware on your system. So you have to be really careful when you're on social media as well. So I did update the information that the author has in the textbook a little bit on some of the statistics. In 2024, on a global basis, there were more than 5.5 billion data breaches that occurred. That's a staggering number of breaches. And it represents a huge increase over 2023 of 800%. That's really alarming when you think about it. So how are they getting in? How, are they hacking into the system? How are they really getting in? Well, what they found is that in 22% of the time, the data breaches occurred because they had forged credentials. So they had stolen an employee's credentials and were able to get in because they used that employee's credentials. They most likely got those credentials via social engineering and phishing means. 20% of the time, they found a vulnerability. And a term you'll hear talked about when we're talking about cybercrime is a 0-day vulnerability. And the definition of a 0-day means that the cyber security community has been aware of this vulnerability for 0 days, meaning no one even knew that that existed. It was a way for the criminal to get in, a backdoor that nobody knew existed. And so if you don't know there's a vulnerability, of course, you haven't put in particular ways to protect that. And so that's a significant number of them came in through vulnerabilities in the system. And it could be anywhere in the system, a number of places. And phishing is right up there along with that. That's, again, getting someone to give you access that you shouldn't have, information that you shouldn't have. Now, the biggest cyber attack in 2024, as I had mentioned a little earlier, was United Healthcare. And that was the result of a stolen employee's credentials. So they were able to, whether the employee had done something stupid like write down their username and password and leave it on their desk, and one of the maintenance peoples, one of the janitors at night going by saw it on the desk and wrote down the information, which I'll diverge for a second. The three most likely groups of individuals in a company to steal from the company, take advantage of the company, there's three groups that you should really be careful of. One is your security, the security guards that you have. Another are the maintenance janitorial staff. And then the third group is, of course, your IT people. And with the IT personnel, that should be obvious, they have access to everything. So you need to make sure that you're paying your IT staff so that they don't have a desire to, pad their paycheck. Likewise, the janitors and the security people are often the lower paid employees in your organization. And yet they're wandering around all over through the building at night with no one watching them. So who knows? I didn't read the story far enough to see if they figured out how the employees' credentials were stolen. But here's what it cost. It cost United Healthcare directly $2.9 billion because this cyber attack shut them down. They were not able to access their data system to provide the information to hospitals and doctors. And so direct cost to them, 2.9 billion, which is a lot, but they also paid out 6 billion in assistance to those healthcare providers that they couldn't provide the information to. So $8.9 billion. And also there was a $22 million, which seems pretty small by comparison, ransom that they had to pay so that they could get their system back and working. Credit card fraud and theft. This, a lot of people are concerned about this. And in fact, there's a lot of reports of this. I mean, 450,000 reports in 2024, just this last year. Now, the thing I found interesting, when they look at the demographics of the people who made those reports, the largest group was the 30 to 39-year-olds. That was accounted for 29% of the credit card fraud. I would think that a 30 to 39-year-old has grown up in, this age of computers and should know better. It's not the grandma and grandpa. No, there's a number of them that, of course, fall into that too, but it's not the majority. The biggest group is actually that 30 to 39-year-olds. So how does it happen? Well, of course, you can steal a physical card. That's pretty obvious. What may not be as obvious is a thing called card skimming. And what this involves is that the cyber criminal has a device that they can run your card through and it pulls all the information off. Or it can be a device that gets attached to a legitimate terminal. So it looks like that ATM terminal is correct, but they have managed to put a physical device on there that is intercepting the information. And the card skimming devices can be really small, so that restaurant server that you hand your credit card to and they go off into the back someplace and then they come back in there. They may have had a skimmer sitting around the corner, where they've hidden it, where they just quickly pull it out, quick swipe, and they put it back and no one notices anything. We've already talked about phishing, where someone talks you into giving them your PIN or your password, and of course, using stolen account information. This is probably not what the stolen account information doesn't end up in stealing your existing credit card. What they do is they use the stolen account information to actually create a new credit card using your name, your address, your social security number, where you've worked, because that information is all out on the internet. And that's what a company asks for when they're issuing you a card and when they're checking your credit. If they have all those pieces of information to satisfy the credit bureau and the credit card company, they can create a new account in your name, but they now have the physical card or numbers. So again, using the information that's already out there in the databases, whether it's DMV or IRS. IRS was a victim of a data breach here about, must be about 4 years ago now. So it is one thing that a lot of people are afraid of happening. Even though if you have credit card fraud, perpetrated against you, you're not liable for it. You can get it, to where your money is returned. You can get it so it doesn't show up on your credit report. It does take some work. Now, as we talk about this and why it's important to have cybersecurity, I've been an advocate for being cautious and taking all the measures you can to protect yourself for many, many years. I was promoting it before people were familiar with terms like antivirus and things like that. But I've been the victim of, identity theft twice. Now, fortunately, they didn't hit me in credit card fraud. I have had several times where I saw, in fact, in this past year, it happened twice, a transaction that I didn't make. And so I had to call up the credit card company and say, this is not my transaction. They canceled the account, sent me a new card. It was a bit of a hassle because those cards were used. I had a number of recurring transactions that occurred on them. And so I had to reset up all of that, but it didn't cost me any money, just a little bit of time. Let's see. We talked about if you have these, this information, it allows you to access someone's financial resources and notice this, the FTC logged in 2024 1 million identity theft reports. And so when you think about it, that's 1 in every 300 people. That's a lot of identity theft that's happening. And sometimes you won't know about it until you go and try to do something. Like you go and try to find a new apartment and they turn you down and you go, why? And they say, because you're 12 months behind your rent. You go, that's not me. I don't live at that location. That's, someone else using your name. That happened to a friend of mine. They had used his name, and so it showed up that he was delinquent with all his utilities and all this other stuff. And it was my friend had moved into the area from out of the area. It took quite a bit of work for him to convince people that he wasn't that person that was using his information. Okay, some of the things, spoofing, the concept there is that you're pretending to be someone else. And if you ever hear from somebody, they say, hey, why did you send me that goofy email? They can, unfortunately, on the internet, they can spoof it so that an email that they send appears to have come from you. It has your name, it has your email address in there. And this is because of one of the inherent weaknesses in the internet. When the internet was first implemented, it was created as an information sharing system. And the assumption was that everybody wanted to play nice on this system and to benefit everyone and to just freely share information. Nobody imagined that cyber criminals would figure out ways to misuse it. So there's not a lot built into the inherent architecture of the internet to prevent someone from changing the information so that it looks like that email is coming from someone else, perhaps a friend or an acquaintance. And they can also do that with phone numbers. So it looks like someone else is calling you than really is. Farming is a redirect. So you think you're going to wellsfargo.com, but instead it gets intercepted and redirects you to a different address. And what they will do is they will create a second website that looks like the one that you were intending to go to, but it has bad things built into it. And so there's a number of ways that this happens. This is usually happen because you've gone to a website that you shouldn't have gone to, and something got installed on your browser that will hijack that. So when you type in wellsfargo.com, it grabs that, changes it, and it displays and tells you that that's where you're going, but you really aren't. And that's the way that that happens is a number of call spam or junk websites. They may have information, advertisements to other sites, but they've got code built into them, bad code. And what I've seen an increase of in these is where someone puts on a website, oh, here's an interesting article, the 10 ugliest chihuahuas or something, like that, or the 10 funniest cat videos. And you think, oh, that'd be kind of fun to go look at. And so you go there not realizing that the site you've gone to has other sites on it that are not safe sites to go to, and you end up getting malicious code installed. Two terms you'll hear talked about is denial of service or distributed denial service. They're very similar. A denial of service attack is just simply you send a bunch of requests to a website very rapidly. And in fact, the website can't handle it. So at the same time, other people are trying to put in requests to that website, but it either takes a long time or doesn't go through at all. And so it's a way of flooding the input channel. Any site is designed, it can only handle so many requests per second. It's just due to the electronics and the physics, they can only handle so much. And so you overflow, you just flood it with stuff to where the website can't handle it. And it may crash the website or just make it run slow. When that happens, oftentimes the reason that the cyber criminal is doing that is that they will then send a blackmail request to the company saying, we'll stop the attack if you deposit $10 million in this account. One of the ways that they accomplish this is through the use of botnets. And a botnet is just a group of computers that are acting as robots that you just tell them and say, okay, just send a bunch of junk to this specific website. And they all say, okay, and off they go and do it. Now, the larger version of this, it's called distributed denial of service. And the reason it's just the word distributed is tacked on there is it's not the cyber criminals botnets that are actually doing the attack. Instead, they are enlisting the help of all of our computers, yours and mine. What they will do is on malicious websites that you go to, it ends up installing some malicious code on your computer that does nothing except sit there and wait for the command to go. When it gets the command, it then takes over your computer and starts sending all this stream of junk requests to a website. And so you'll get tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of computers that a minute ago were working just fine. And all of a sudden they're going really, really, really slow because all of the computer power is being used to send out these requests. And so if you ever notice that your computer all of a sudden starts going really slow, disconnect from the internet, reboot your computer, and then you need to do a thorough scan of your computer with antivirus and other software to find and see if you're infected with one of these sleepers that are there to do that. And one of the things, the devices that are being used for this now, unfortunately, is with the Internet of Things. When you think about it, that video doorbell, that smart refrigerator, any of those devices, what are they? They're a computer. And they're hooked up to Wi-Fi. And so if that Wi-Fi gets hacked, a malicious cyber criminal can access the device and potentially install software onto that video camera. But again, it stays dormant until it gets the command over the internet to activate. And so the Internet of Things has created a whole slew of problems because typically the devices, the Internet of Things, are not expensive devices. They're inexpensive. No one wants to pay $500 for a video doorbell. So consequently, a lot of these Internet of Things devices are inexpensive. Not a lot of time was put into engineering of them. They haven't been updated from the date of manufacture. They're still running the same version software. And so they're a pretty easy target for this type of activity. Now, the other thing that they sometimes do with the DDoS attack is they're not really trying to ransom the company for money. Instead, they're using it as a distraction so that the company is putting all their resources on trying to manage the chaos that this is creating. And instead, they're inserting in a virus or something else to steal some data, some other information that was the real target. So sometimes it is a smokescreen. Now, the biggest financial threat to businesses comes from insiders. That's what I was mentioning before, where you have people that have access throughout the building, like the janitors and the security and the IT people. They're prime threats to create a crime against your company because they have the access to privileged information. And internally, a lot of companies focus their security on external threats and they don't put as much focus on the internal. Even though the studies have shown that it's more likely to be an insider that is the source of the cyber attack than an outsider. Another issue we can have is poorly designed software. And this kind of goes in like I was talking about the video doorbell. We've got a lot of demand for new products coming out quick, and consequently, things get released before they really should. The time has not been spent investing in the software, doing thorough testing of it to make sure that there aren't problems or vulnerabilities. And so it's just an easy way in for the cyber criminal. I already talked about the 0-day vulnerabilities. There are not a lot of 0-day vulnerabilities out there. In fact, if you find one, it can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars because all the software manufacturers are spending a lot of time and money every day checking their systems, trying to find if there's any possible areas of concern. So, but there are still some, and they do happen. I already talked about the social networks. You have to be careful. You have to use the same judicious, careful browsing when you're on social media as you would if you were on anywhere else on the internet. And there was a hack back in the days when it was still called Twitter, where they were able to get a hold of a number of prominent accounts, and they posted a Bitcoin scam using those accounts. And so when you have a prominent account and someone is saying, hey, this is a good deal, you think, wow, if that person is recommending it. And I already kind of talked a little bit earlier about how you can have in social media something that looks like it's a like button, but it really isn't. So just be suspicious, be ultra cautious, and doubt everything, um, question everything. Now, the mobile devices, of course, has the same risk and vulnerability as any interconnected device. This thing is a computer, and if you don't have appropriate security software installed on your phone, get it, because it has vulnerabilities that uh, could allow someone to get into your bank account, your retirement account, any number of things. Now, it used to be that the majority of mobile malware was targeting Android devices. And the thought was that Apple devices were much more secure. They weren't. Uh, Apple devices may have been slightly more secure, but not really significantly. It was just that Android was the low-hanging fruit. But now that a lot of people are being more cautious with their Android devices and have software installed, there's been an uptick in Apple iOS devices being targeted with malicious mobile malware. One of the things with both Apple and iOS devices is a SIM card weakness. And it can allow someone to hijack your phone number. And you might say, well, who cares if someone hijacks my phone number? But think about your PCC login. In order to log in, you have to get a text message to your phone. What the cyber criminals, when they hijack your phone number, they don't want to log into PCC. They could care less about that. But they would go to your bank account. Let's say you're banking at Wells Fargo, and there's that thing on there where it says, forgot my password, and has, text me a code. And so that's what they do when they hijack your phone. It's so that they can use it to then get into a financial site where they can steal the money. So if you ever have a situation where all of a sudden you go, why isn't my phone working? It could be an indication that your phone has been hijacked and someone is trying to access your financial accounts. And it is, I was listening to someone talk about it happened to them. They noticed all of a sudden in the afternoon that they couldn't use their phones. And so they called their bank right away. And sure enough, someone was trying to log into their account. They were fortunate, shut everything down. They didn't lose any money. So I talked about the Internet of Things security. It's everywhere. Some of the devices have no way to update their software. So it's a lot of vulnerability. The other comment I'll make on this is the challenge with the Internet of Things is that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So you can have excellent security on all 40 of your devices in your home, except that one really cheap item that you just bought. And that can be the way in that a cyber criminal breaks into your network to then monitor your keystrokes on your computer when you log into your bank. So it's a real challenge. Buying cheap, inexpensive, with a device that connects to your home internet is not a good idea. Ways that we can use technology to help us: encryption, VPNs, firewalls, antivirus software, intrusion detection systems. They have some really nifty software that analyzes the network, the traffic that's going on your corporate network, And if it sees something unusual, it will zero in on it and it can determine and say, wait a minute, that's not normal, and shut it down. Pretty neat. But all of that is great and we should do it. But 95% of the data breaches that have happened are tied to human error. We don't spend near enough time in business educating our employees on how not to be the victim of social engineering, what to do, what not to do. And so we need to really ramp that up. We need to get it to where the major reason for a breach is not a human mistake. Things management needs to do, the risk assessment, the security policy, have an implementation. Again, all really great stuff. And like this idea of security audits, you check to see, is everyone following the policies, they doing everything. Great, good things to do. But the last thing is to have a plan in place so that what if it happens to us? What are we going to do? You need to know how you're going to respond if you get hit with a DDoS attack. If you get a ransom, if your data gets encrypted and you can't access any of your data and there's a ransom, how are you going to respond? It's better to have thought about it ahead of time than in the spur of the moment. Well, we're getting close to the end for this week. I did want to show you the diagram that just shows, I like that the author has it in here. How does a transaction happen? When you're the merchant, the customer makes a purchase, the money doesn't go directly to the merchant. The merchant sends that request to the clearinghouse that goes to the consumer's card issuing bank, that goes to a merchant bank and comes back. There's quite a few transactions involved here. And the reason for being aware of that is that sometimes, not often, but sometimes something goes wrong in that transaction. It doesn't happen. And so you might have to go in and research it and fix it. When I was the online web marketing manager for a nonprofit, there were a few times where I had to go, call the bank and communicate with them, figure out why a donor's transaction didn't go through or it went through incorrectly. So there are other ways than using credit cards to pay now. Certainly PayPal is the one that kind of was the groundbreaking in that, but others have fallen in line with PayPal. Amazon Pay, Meta Pay. And what's been really big here recent is this buy now, pay later. Before the days of electronic transactions, it was a lot of stores would have, you could buy something on layover. So they would put it aside for you in the stock room and you paid a certain amount each month. And when it was fully paid for, then you could take it out. That's not a bad way to do it with layaway. This buy now, pay later is really, you're making a commitment for something that you don't have the money to pay for it today. So it's still kind of like a credit card, which is not a good idea. Mobile phones, really big in Europe and Asia, is catching on a little bit in the US of using your mobile phone as your wallet. It utilizes near field communications, QR codes. There's quite a number of companies that are offering the mobile wallet apps. The key to be aware with these is that the near field communication means that somebody that is, if they get close enough to you, they might be able to use that same technology to read the information that's on your phone and get access to your wallet. And in fact, they do make wallets, especially for if you're traveling, that you can put your phone in a pouch, a wallet, so to speak, that is shielded from near field communications so that someone can't come up and stand close to you and scan your phone and get the data off of it. Okay, that's chapter 5. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff in here, and I just touched the surface of it, but it's an important topic.